Serious. Former cult members or friends of cult members of Reddit. What is your creepiest, scariest or most disturbing story, and is that what made you leave? I worked for a cult. It was a private school for rich kids who had addictions. There was a dynamic leader who had an inner circle of young boys who he doted on. The school itself was somewhat abusive. Untrained staff like myself administering meds, and when I started, I was able to administer PRN-thorazine. As a staff member, I had to live like the students, adhere to the same rules and regs. Then they worked to distance me from my family, telling me I had an addiction. I didn't, and that it was dangerous for me to use my time off to see my family. I walked away after a few weeks because I thought I was too weak to work there. Then I went back and realized what a terrible place it was. Finally left, with a brand new eating disorder I had managed to avoid during my own adolescence. The school shut down eventually due to lawsuits from parents. The former students have a Facebook page, and from what I can tell, many struggle with the systematic abuse they experienced. The leader has since died, and turned out all his degrees and awards were faked. It taught me a lot about safety and services for vulnerable people. The scariest moment was the student who was actively psychotic and should have been in a lockdown facility but who was still with us. I was told to restrain him even though he wasn't fighting. He was on a hunger strike and refused to leave the building for a meeting. I had to carry him to the meeting, then restrain him the whole time. An old friend of mine is part of the Growing in Grace cult. She has a 666 tattooed on her arm and believes their leader is Jesus' second coming. He's dead now, but his followers insist he isn't. The guy was a hustler and a liar and fucked every pretty follower he encountered despite being married. My friend met him once but told me she was sad cause he didn't ask her to come back to his room. She really wanted to fuck him to be near his divinity, as she puts it. The guy was gross and like 30 years her senior. I was best friends with an Olympic athlete who was into Scientology. Due to his semi-fame, he was given the VIP treatment at their Hollywood Celebrity Center, where I often accompanied him. I sat in the waiting room with the likes of Lisa Marie Presley and Giovanni Ribisi while he did his auditing sessions. When he introduced me to John Travolta at one of their celebrity events, Travolta wrapped me in a bear hug and lifted me off the ground. My friend convinced me to leave my day job and work as his personal assistant. He was doing a lot of corporate speaking appearances. I moved into his house and we lived like brothers, swimming in his pool, going to strip clubs, working out at his training gym. I had some amazing experiences, like going backstage at the American Music Awards and hanging out alone with Guns N' Roses for 2 hours. The church's publicity team wanted to set him up with a girlfriend. They set up a series of dates with very cute Scientologists, but nothing really took off. We had a lot of philosophical discussions. I found many of Scientology's aspects to be very insightful, but the money grubbing and the Xenu business kept me too skeptical to fall in. At one point, he made an anti-gay argument, basically saying, imagine carrying that to the extreme. We'd all die off. Things got creepy when he started asking me for rubdowns after his workouts. Then one night inviting me to masturbate with him. I passed. Then at a party he propositioned my gay cousin, who immediately told me. Obviously I have nothing against gays, but I felt very creeped out. He was behind on paying me because he had run up huge debts for services at the church. I left and we haven't spoken since. I feel like I got closer to the inside of Scientology than any non-Scientologist ever has. I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on with Tom Cruise, you know. I would almost guarantee that, someone from Sea Org read this. Someone figured out who you must be. Someone is now preparing to contact you. The capital C in contact is quite unsettling. I have no idea what my phone is even doing anymore. My parents were members of an Islamic cult with a fake guru holy man sort of thing. He used to lead group chants and things, and one time while everyone's eyes were closed chanting away in the semi-darkness, me and him locked eyes and he realized that I was laughing at how dumb it was. He had a vendetta against me since then. He turned my parents against me first, convincing them that one day in the future, he could read the future apparently. Rolls eyes. I would break their hearts and leave and destroy the family because they were so invested in him they started believing it and treating me, a 13-year-old, as if I had already committed the unspeakable act. After this he made my parents focus on my older brother more than me, lavishing him with expensive gifts such as Gucci watches, a brand new Mitsubishi Jeep with a private plate before he even passed his driving test, and experiences like executive box seats to major sports events up and down the country plus more. This wasn't enough. After this he convinced all of his followers that I was mentally handicapped, and needed to be kept isolated. For most of my teenage years I would come back from school, college, university to an empty house, many times not seeing another soul for weeks. The story of my parents' retarded child spread through the entire community where it is an accepted fact now, and I can't get married because everybody just assumes that I am mentally disabled. After this, he bankrupted my parents and family, making them pay all his bills, expenses and rewarding them with prayers. Through a too complicated to go into now chain of events, I was given the responsibility to become a full-time parent to my 2-year-old girl cousin. So he convinced everybody that I was a pedophile and molesting a baby, so I could not be left alone with her. He convinced my parents that I was their enemy, and his sons were their real sons, and to ignore me my entire life. To this day, I have never once been able to have a heart-to-heart talk with either of my parents. I have been working for 6 years now. They don't even know the name of my boss, or team, or even what I do. They are only interested in what day I get paid. There has been more done to me than this short amount, but I just replied because I want to say that I am a better man than anyone has ever understood, and I forgive my parents now that bastard has finally been dragged to hell. I forgive them not because they deserve it, but because I believe that this experience made me stronger as a person. If all this could not break me through all those years, then what the fuck can break me now? The most disturbing thing about this cult was firstly that there are a million holy men like this all over the world. The second most disturbing thing is how easy it is for them to gather followers who believe that they are divinely powered individuals, through nothing more than cheap parlor tricks, vague prophecies and unprovable claims. Like the time he had visited Jupiter via spirit travel. If anybody is reading this, who is going through something similar, all I will say is that your family is ill. If they were of a sound mind, they would not be doing these things. Be kind, be good, be better than them. Peace. How can educated people be so ignorant? There is a YouTube video of such a self-proclaimed scholar lecturing his followers about how astronauts who have been to Mars saw the Earth as a darkened blue sphere, but in the darkness, they saw the bright glimmering spot which happens to be the place of their worship. Seriously? The audience was filled with doctors and engineers. How can they fall for such petty tricks? P.S. For those who aren't sure, humans have never been to Mars. Probably because during the course of their studies skeptical inquiry is not focused upon as much as we would probably like. Their professions also deal mainly with procedures. For example, performing operations or designing and testing systems against known samples, where skepticism isn't required as much as say the sciences for instance. Couple that with a Dunning-Kruger-like effect and presto you have a more susceptible person. Addendum. Just because someone is in a field demanding skepticism doesn't mean they apply it to their lives. I had a chemistry lab demonstrator who is excellent at his chemistry, but at the same time believed that the moon landings were a conspiracy and the earth is flat. Made the lab really awkward, especially as he invariably discussed his theories with me every time he was there for a few weeks. Well, that is very sad. Which community do you belong to? There are a lot of these kind of cults in my country. Seriously, all you have to do is switch on the TV in early morning and you'll be bombarded with fake babas and gurus spreading superstition. My mom used to follow one such asshole. It later turned out that he used to sexually exploit his women devotees. And this guy made a crapload of money before he was served any justice. Why do you continue to live with your parents? Because I love them. And they are broken. This son of a bitch was basically God to them. And they felt powerful and important with him in the cult. Now he's gone, they have forgotten how to live in the real world. Mountains of debt and little mental strength. I am better than them and they need help, not hatred. I don't know if it was a cult or not, but I grew up in a church group that was pretty close if not. My creepiest story is this. A big church that led, read, controlled by fear. A lot of little churches ran a college, read, unaccredited brainwashing, for all the little churches' kids. So we didn't have to go to secular school, which was pretty much considered the devil. The pastor of that big church was almost worshipped. Everyone loved him and gave him free rein to tell them what to do with their lives. I went to this college because there was really no other acceptable choice when my family was in this group. Between my freshman and sophomore year there, this pastor was convicted of having sex with a teen girl he was counseling and of taking her across state lines, etc. He was later sentenced to 12 years in prison. The creepy factor is, I know for a fact that this man had keys to every door on campus and he was known to make surprise visits to the girls' dormitories. Meaning, this convicted predator had a key to my room and no one dared question him on anything. My family had been slowly on their way out for years, but this situation was the straw that broke the camel's back. Anyone remember the family radio group from a couple years back? I left because I woke up on the 22nd of May, slowly pieced my life back together. I don't think there's a lot of creepiness that happened, but mostly disturbing events. When you're raising children to believe they've been born to die and their only purpose is to get the word out, everyone's in for a fucked up ride. Your last sentence is so good. There's a cult in my town that promised that the 5th generation would be the messiahs or saviors or something, which caused the cult to breed and interbreed at extremely young and illegal ages. Actually, I should check to see what generation they are up to these days. But talk about a head trip if you are the 5th generation. Got involved with Scientology. Weirdest thing with me was that no matter what you did or said, you were wrong. I got harassed by them, asked for money. They came to my house, followed me everywhere I went, even school. They'd just sit in the back of the lecture hall, and they videotaped me once when I was starting to back out of the religion. Edit. What I described is what they call fair game. Very fundamental church. More extreme than most. I got my first clue at a women's gathering when we were passing out snacks and a grown woman said to me, "Oh no, my husband doesn't allow me to eat potato chips." Allow interesting. I got more and more clues as I was there. People upset with me for reading liberal magazines, which was Reader's Digest. Then I was shunned for using worldly means for trying to lose some weight and using a diet drink mix. I was told I should be praying about it and more faith. The kicker was when the pastor's wife told me that she could tell every day where I was in my walk with Jesus spiritually, because of how much makeup I was wearing that day. Yup, time to go.